Hello and welcome to this video. My name is David Thorne. In this Swift programming video, we're going to be talking all about data sources and how to pass data from the likes of a database or a file system or just a stream of data, a stream of bytes or something, all the way over to a whole bunch of views. Okay, and what we're assuming here is that you've got in this scenario, we've got four different views. This could be four different screens, four different features, whatever you want to call them, but something that takes up the whole of the screen on your device. All right. And so you could be displaying a list view that displays a list of item titles in this sense, and then a detail view that displays then that individual item, and it just shows the title of that one item. Very, very boring, simple view. And then a form view, which is going to create an item by making a new title. Then a feed view model, and it could be lots of sections of lots of different types of items. And so on. So this is your application in its most abstract form, without any of the likes of iOS or SwiftUI or macOS or anything like that getting in our way. We're just going to write pure code. So as you can see here, we have a list view, detail view, form view, feed view, and each view has a view model. As you can see here, form view model, detail view model, list view model. And as I've spoke about in other videos, the source of truth for the list view is the view model. Now, and that is the same for detail view model, and then form view model, and then feed view model as well. Is when they need data, they go to the view model to get that data. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the view models themselves are the source of truth. It can be that all of these view models here all talk to the same data source. Okay, they all talk to the same data source to get their information. All right, now so we're only going to need one data source, but the data source is very low level in itself, and I'm going to implement this first of all a little bit backwards. I'm going to implement the data source, and I'm then going to show you the pitfalls that we're going to get when only creating a data source and when only giving this list view model the data source. And the whole point of this is to be able to hide as much generic information from the list view and the view model as possible. Okay, and so we don't want it knowing about types. We don't want it knowing about protocols, really. We're going to try and keep as much information hidden as possible from the list view, because that makes it modular. All right, and it means that you can use it everywhere. So your list view model, or the view models, need to be they're tightly coupled to the view. They're basically completely coupled to the view. That they both belong with each other. But the list view model should be tightly coupled from its source of data and so on. So we should only use protocols here, but we really shouldn't. We should try not to use any generics inside of the list view model as well, because that highlights the types to it as well. So we're going to attempt to do this in this one video, and we're going to try and solve this. And it might mean by creating other types to hide this implementation. All right. Now, obviously, there are other ways of doing this with the likes of opaque and boxed types, or boxed protocol types in Swift. But I don't want to go down that road yet, because you're going to have to use old legacy code and fix old legacy code in an old legacy way. And this is why I'm going to teach you this way today. All right. So let's jump over to the data source file that we have already. And this is going to be our source of truth. All right. And the source of truth that we are going to be having is something called an item protocol. Okay. And this item protocol does so much. It literally has a title. That's it. And you can get this title and you can set this title. However, the title, all items should have an ID, and that should be immutable. So it should just be immutable. So within inside of this data source protocol, it should have a set of items, and that should be an array of item protocol, and these can be get and set. All right. And now, with inside of this, I mean, you could abstract and hide this information here. You don't necessarily have to give it the items, but just for the sake of instructional purposes, let's give it this property that make it public. All right. So the next thing, well, if anything, we should only make them. It should be a getter from outside, so it should be immutable from the outside. All right, and the functionality is a thing that's going to mutate it. So first things first, we need to say get items. If we're not going to allow you to, you could just say the items, but otherwise we're going to say get items, and that's going to return an array of item protocol. The next thing we want to be able to do is get an item, and we're going to say by string here, and we're going to return an item protocol. Well, if this doesn't exist, well, don't want there. If this doesn't exist, then we're going to throw instead. And I far prefer throwing rather than giving an optionals back. All right, especially at this low level. But we're going to start coming into problems with this string here, and I want you to take note of this. This string is going to be a problem for us that we're going to have to change in the future. And if you can work out why, then write it in the comments down below. So the next thing we want to be able to do is add an item. All right, and this add item is going to basically have a DTO. All right, we're not going to be allowing something to create an item protocol from outside. This data source is a thing that's going to create this item protocol. So we're going to need a struct, and this is going to be item DTO. All right, and what we're allowing them to create here is an item DTO with a title. So we come in here and we say item DTO, and when they add it, we're going to return it an item protocol. All right, nice and simple. Now, when we say update, we're going to say, I want you to update this ID of this one item, and I'm going to give you an item DTO once again, and I'm going to return you the item protocol too. So we're saying we're giving as little information as possible. We're saying this ID is what you need to update it with, and this is the DTO you want to update it with as well. And this too is going to throw it because we're going to need to get the item first of all to be able to update it. And the next thing is then going to be able to remove and the ID of string. And obviously this is going to need to throw as well because we're going to have to get it first of all to check that it exists. And if it does remove it, we're just going to void it anyway. All right. Or you could return the item there that it did remove, but in this scenario, we're just going to say remove. So now we've got create, we've got read, we can get an item and we can get all of the items as well. We can update the item and we can delete the item. Happy days, all right? So this now is our data source protocol. So let's now go ahead and create this with a class. Because the struct is just not right for this. You know, there's a time and place for structs, and this is not the time. So we have our items, and as I said, I'm going to remove all of these any's here because we want it to be this code to be compatible with old code as well. All right, and it doesn't have any initializers, no problem. We'll give it an initializer there. And so function get items. This one's super simple. We just say items. And let's start with get item. So we're going to use this technique, which I want to use because I prefer it. I think it's cleaner, and I just like it personally. So we're going to say items. We're going to say items, and then we'll say first index where, and here we're going to say $ID is equal to ID. And if this not exist, then this is where we're going to throw the error here. And we're going to call this data source error, and it's going to be not found. And at the moment, the data source error is also not found. So let's just come up here and create it. And it's going to be a string, and then it's going to conform to error as well. And whoops, we're going to say case not found. Nice and simple. All right, so now we're throwing an error if we can't find it. And we can turn around to say here, and then basically just say items, and then say whoops, and say index. And we now have the item that we want, nice and cleanly as well. Now add, we have our DTO, so we want to create a new item, but we don't actually have an item yet, so we actually have to implement it. So struct item is going to implement item protocol, and we're going to need a var ID, and we're going to need a var title as well. All right, happy days. We need a var ID for the future because we're probably going to use identifiable, so I'm just going to add it as a var ID for the time being. And so we now want to be able to create it. Let's generate a UUID, and I'm just going to use UUID string to keep it nice and simple, and then just do dto.title to change it, and then we can say items.append item, and then we can return the item. Super simple. All right, now you could check to see whether this title is already in there. If that's one of your constraints, that it's always got to have a unique title, you could do that too. So update, we can pretty much copy and paste this one code here, and now we've got this DTO, so we want to create this DTO first of all right? But we already know which item it is, all right? So we can say here items, and we've got the index. So now we have the item, but we want to be able to mutate the item. So we're going to say var underscore item, and now we can come here and var underscore item title, and then we'll say DTO item here, and we're going to return, because we said we're going to return something, we're going to return the updated version of the item. But now we need to say items index, and we're going to update this item. Now, at the moment, this data source has full control. It's the source of truth of these item protocols. And so it's where all the business logic is actually happening of the updating of the DTOs to the database items too. So this is going to bite us in the future as well, because we're giving this data source a bit too much information, and it knows this. And is this the responsibility of a data source? Well, we'll look at that later. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the ID. So once again, we're going to find the index here, and we're going to say index remove at. Now we have the index here, and we can remove it perfectly fine. All right, so this is now our data source created, and like I said, it's going to bite us a little bit in the future, but that's the whole point of this video, is to show you how to get around these things. So let's start off, because we know we don't have any items in the list view. All right, so let's move our form view model up to the top, and we're going to assume that inside the body we're going to say a form to create an item, and we don't have a form here, so we're going to have to have an action and say submit button clicked or tapped or whatever, right? And this is the action that actually got happened. So let's say form view is equal to form view, and then we're going to say form view submit button got clicked. And just for the sake of printing out our form view dot body, let's run this just to show you a form to create an item. This was the view that got done, and then we said submit button, and we can say here we don't really need to have this, but submit button clicked. Obviously the Swift UI or UI kit or macOS, that would deal with this button click here, okay? But so this is us manually controlling this button click, and we can see here submit button clicked. So we need to tell our view model that add item, right? Or yeah, this form is going to be the add item, and this is what's going to happen. All right. So our form view now needs a view model, and form view model. And so when we come here, now we need to create, let's just call it form view model is equal to form view model, and then view model is equal to form view model. Happy days. And inside of here, we are going to then say submit button clicked in here instead, and we'll say add item. And we run this once again, we get exactly the same thing because we've moved the responsibility up here instead. Now, in this form, it's going to have a title, right? There's a field here that has a title, so we're going to add a title here instead, all right? And inside of here, this is then going to be, whoops, my new title, all right? This is what's going to be added, and we need to add the label to it as well. All right, so submit, should add new item here with title. Let's run this once again. We can see here we get should add new item, my new title. So now that we've got this, we need a DTO, right? Because we've already talked about this. And we've now created our DTO, but we now need a data source. So let's start getting a data source here. And we can use then the protocol itself. And we need to come back here once again, data source here. And we're going to say data source items is then going to be empty. And we come here, data source, and now our view model is happy once again. And now we can say data source add item, right? We have a DTO, and now we receive our item back and new item title with the ID here. So now we can say ID, all right? And was add, it didn't, okay, the add didn't have a throw on it. So now we can update this and we can see should add new item, my title and ID. So we now have the ID for this. So we can start coming down to our list view instead, right? And our list view wants to basically take the items, all right? And then we want to loop through the items. We want to loop through the items, and we're going to say that it's an array of strings here. We want to reduce through the items with the initial result of nothing, and then we're going to say then here we're going to make a string, and we're going to say partial results, and then we're going to say B, and then we're going to put a new line on here as well. Now our view model needs to be, and we're going to make a function here, going to give it too much responsibility first of all, and then we're going to remove the responsibility. So we're going to say here, get item protocol here. And once we've got these get items, once again, we're going to need a data source to be able to view these items, all right? And we can just say here, get data source, get items, happy days. And now our list view needs a view model once again. And we can say list view model, get items here. And now we can say map. And we can map then the title to be an array of strings, okay? So now we have our list view here. Let's come and create our list view, and we say list view. We need a list view model 2, and that needs a data source, and that needs a data source, and we can say list view model here, and list view model. Oh, well, actually, that was wrong. Sorry, we needed that there. Okay, now we have our list view model. And we can say print list view body, all right? Nice and simple. And when we run this once again, you can see here that it put in my new title. So if we run this a couple of times now here, so the submit button clicked, we added a new item and we put my new title, and rather than doing that, let's make a new title here, and we want to pop the title in here and then we're just going to put the ID in there as well instead. Whoops, that's not what we wanted. And then we put a pipe in there. And we run this once again. You can see here my new title, and we get the 3 different items within inside of our list view. So we can see now that our list view talks to its view model. It really doesn't know that much. This information here that's happening within inside of the view, this body, is really way too much information that's needed. And there's no reason for this list view to have to know about the item protocol. It just needs to know about the strings. And so we can move this logic here to the view model, and now the view model doesn't know anything about, it knows nothing about the item protocol, right? It just knows about an array of strings, okay? And I'm going to allow it to know this. We could remove it a little bit more, but it's only knowing about strings. Strings are a primitive type in Swift, so it can know about these. That's fine. So now we have that. We now want the detail view model, right? And the whole idea is display item, display title. So we need the title of the actual item itself. So we're going to need to have to remove this and return that. And now we're going to have to say item, and we want to say the view model once again and get item, okay, here, and then we're going to say title. So this means that our view model, first of all, we need a view model here, and this is going to be detail view model, and this detail view model needs to say get item, and needs to have an item protocol. But first of all, what item does it need to have? Well, it's going to use a string, and we're then going to have to then say we need a data source. So we're going to say data source for this too, and we're going to use the protocol. We say data source gets item by ID, and we know that this is going to throw, so we're going to force unwrap it just to be stupid. And we now need the ID, so we're going to have to pass an ID to our detail view as well. All right, and we can then say item title. So now our detail view is working fine. So let's generate our detail view with the ID, and we'll take one of these items that it returned, submits. Let's just say item is equal to data source get items at last here. And we'll say item ID here, and now we need a detail view model. So we're going to come and create this detail view model now, and detail view model. We've got a data source, and we now just need to come and say print detail view model body and run this. And now you can see display my title. So let's just put some quotes around this. Put some quotes around this, and we can see display my new title of item. So we've added it. So this is how, we've got one data source now, and we've got multiple views that are all interacting with that one data source. And then the feed view model, well, this would be lots of sections. It's basically doing the same thing as lists. So we don't necessarily have to do this, but you could have all different types of items here. But this is where the feed view, it can't really rely upon one data source. It might need multiple data sources. And so this is where we're going to need to expand our data source to be more generic, because right now it's kind of hard coded with this item protocol. So we're going to need our data source to be more generic, but we're going to need like a service for this one item itself. So let's come and create another source file and called item service instead. All right, and let's come to our data source and let's copy all of this, because we know this works, and we're going to call this then the item service protocol, and we're going to implement that there. and then we're going to say this there, and now we've got something that we know works. All right, so let's come back to our main, and rather than say this, we're going to say source. I'm going to say item service, and we know that works. So now we just have to go all the way around and change it to service instead. Okay, and service. That's done, and now we come to our detailed model, an item service protocol, and we come and change it wherever else it says it, and there as well. And we run this, and we're happy days once again. We've got all the items we need. So we now know that our item service protocol is directly relative to this one item protocol. All right. And our view models, they know about this. So we now need that this item service, well, it doesn't know about we don't want the logic in here, right? We want this item service to have a data source, right? Because that's where the data is actually going to be saved. So we're going to say data source here, and we're going to move the data source up to the top instead. And we're going to say data source here, and copy and paste this. We don't want items in here anymore. And we'll say self.datasource. We're removing the source of truth up to the data source, okay? Which is no problem, because we just say data source get items here, and then we can then copy and paste this and say get items there. That's fine. Whoops, items, sorry. And we can do this once again because we need items once again. We can't append that, but we're going to fix that in a second. We're going to come down here, and we're going to come down here. We're going to fix all these things in a second as we go through. All right. Does not conform to it. Yeah. Okay. What does it not add stubs? Okay, that's what we want to get rid of this here because we don't want that to be visible. All right. Let's fix the first problem. Well, this items.append, we can't append to it because it's immutable, first of all. So we're going to have to come here and basically say data source and add DTO, right? Well, add DTO, that's fine right now. And we can return this information and we get rid of that. Right now, this item is unused, all right? What else have we got? So we've got this update. Well, we can say data source update the ID and then the DTO as well. And then this can throw, and we can return that. So that's the logic there. And now the remove, so we can turn around and say data source remove ID and say try here once again. Okay, so we are kind of working right now, but argument type does not conform to data source protocol. All right, so now we've got this data source and we want to have a data source here. And let's just generate a data source here. And let's spell this correctly. Okay, so now when we run this all should work fine, which it does, right? But we've got lots of warnings now that this was never used, this was never used, this was never used within inside of our service. So we know data source is working, but we want to remove this the knowledge of this one item protocol. So we're going to have to give it associated types, all right? And we're going to say where it's identifiable. Okay, so we're going to put this there, we're going to put that there, going to put that there, going to put that there, and so on. All right. So now we've done this, but our item, it needs to be more ID. Right. We want to say rather than use a string, it needs to be an ID because it's identifiable. Okay. So let's go ahead now and change this to be then the item protocol. That's not to conform to here. What's wrong with this then? Oh, there we go. Okay, so now we can say item and we can change this to be item everywhere instead, just to fix this step by step as we go through. And this is then item ID. Where are we missing this? Item protocol and identifiable. No, wait a second. We've got item ID, it is identifiable. What we need here inside the data source, is we need to pass in this T, right, that is identifiable, okay? And then we can say here T as well, all right? So this then, what are you not conforming to? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We just need to update all of these methods here. So we can now say item ID, and this is what we need to change to make sure it conforms to everything that we want it to conform to. And that conforms to everything. But we now it's this implementation that we don't want, right? So we can come here and we need to basically find the index of the item, right? And then just update it with this one DTO. So really, this DTO needs to be the item that we're going to give it. So which needs to be an item. It needs to be an item. So we're saying, hey, this ID we want you to update with this one item. So we don't necessarily need to have this change here, okay? And we don't necessarily have to change that. We just need to say here that we've now updated it, all right? And add in an item. Well, this DTO is then just going to be an item here instead. So we can get rid of this DTO and we can say items.append DTO, and we're done there. So the point here is that we're not technically responsible anymore for the creation of these items. We're just the one there for the storage of the items. And what are we missing here? Add and update. Okay, add. Oh yeah, there we go. So we need to have item, and update is going to be item 2. Now we're all working here, but the use of protocol. Okay, so this is really where the big problem comes, is because now we've got associated type within inside of this data source protocol, which we can't add this as a member property anymore. We're going to have to make it a generic one because we need to know the concrete type of it. So we're going to have to add this to here, and then we can add this T to here, and we can add this T to here. But we now have this problem because data source get items. We can't. It doesn't conform to it. This is where we have to use the where, right? Where T item is equal to item. All right. We need to tell it. What concrete type this item needs to be. Okay. But we can see here that it's moaning now about item. So we're going to have to come over to item, and we're going to have to implement. It's going to have to implement identifiable. And when we come back over to here, we can see the only one problem now that we have is on the instantiation, or this, right? So cannot convert item DTO. Well, that's okay here. We have this item, and we now need to add that to there. We can see that one fixes it, and updates. So this is where we need to do the playing around, all right? So we're going to say item is equal to items, and then index, here. And this is where we're going to do the manipulation. So we've got the title, I'm going to say DTO title. And now we have the updated version of the ID, the item, sorry. Let's just see what the problem cannot vert. Okay, this needs to be an actual item. Protocol here. There we go. as item. So data source where item is equal to, let's rewrite this again to make sure we got this correct. We want update ID, so we're happy with the ID, and we need a item here. Well, we know that we've got the index items. The items are, that's where our problem is we need to say this is then the item protocol here. And now we can return this, and we can say underscore item there. Cannot convert value of any item protocol. Right, we have, let's remove this once again. And what do we have here? We still got any. We don't want an any. And expected item, that is then identifiable. Thinking. We're just going to do this for the time being to fix it. Yeah, okay, throw. We want an items. That's any item. Let's change this to item. This is me now editing the video. I'm trying to debug why this is not working, and now I decided to leave this in because I think it's important, because you will encounter these types of things. Now I'm recording a video, and I know how to do these things, and I understand where to look and how to debug, but sometimes it's very stressful having the camera on and having to talk about stuff and then trying to think as fast as possible. And sometimes what I'll normally do is I'll just stand up and go and get a coffee and come back, and then I'll just work it out instantly, or it will just happen instantly. So, but what the problem is that the get items on line 47 is where the problem is, because that is returning a different type to than what is the item is. The line 47 should say let items be an array of item, because we know what the concrete class is. We know because we've said where item dots are at the top, where t.item is equal to item. And this is where the main problem is, because at the bottom where datasource.update, it needs to have a concrete class there. That's what it's saying is, hey, you can't give me a protocol. You can't give me any item protocol. You've got to give me a concrete type. And this is what it's saying, cannot convert value of type any item protocol to expected argument type item. This is saying, hey, yes, I understand that any item protocol here is saying, hey, it is the concrete implementation, but it can be any type of that. And we've already said in the constraints for the protocols that it must be of a specific struct type or a implementation type, not any type. And so when I start looking around here and debugging it, and I have a little bit of a sit back and think about it and so on, and keep testing it, and yeah, it's always important. My biggest mistake is still on line 47, and when I change line 47, this it shows me where my problem was. And I was doing the right things, but it was line 47 that really mixed me up. And when you see that I changed line 47, you'll notice how I start moving in the right direction. So sometimes it's a great idea to go back to the beginning of where you were writing code and then just write that code once again. And it takes me about another 4 minutes to get the error. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to sit back and let you watch it. But I do get it in the end, and so I'll speak to you in a second. The item DTO isn't the problem at all, because this is a service. It's supposed to know about the item DTO. Now we're coming up the top. Now we're starting to go, okay, t.item is equal to item. And, me in my head, I'm going, okay, wait a minute. concrete class struct. We're working with the actual type here. We're not working technically with the protocol. We're working with it. And see, now I've sat back. I've sat back for 30 seconds or whatever, and just let my brain think about it rather than trying to do two things at once. And in the end, you know, I'm sat back now. My cursor's, I'm thinking, and it's just the L here. I'm trying to use type inference to work out exactly what type we got here. And you can see we've still got any item protocol. This is because the items that's on line 47 is it's converting a concrete type to protocols. So the compiler's assuming that they could be of any struct, any concrete type that implements or conforms to item protocol. And once again, this is the main problem. Now, I do like the any and the sum in Swift. I think it really does help you. The opaque and the box protocol types do really help you, and they do have lots of uses. But I learnt Swift back in the days of Swift 2 and Swift 3 and so on, where we didn't have this stuff. So I'm very much used to having to do it this way, and I still like doing it this way. But I'm trying to pass you on my knowledge of how you can do it without the any and the sum, because the opaque and the box protocol types, they come with a bag of useful tools, but they also come with some side effects that make it that little bit more difficult for people to understand. Now I'm still trying everything here, but it's the line 47 that I'm just not looking at. And as soon as I look at, I will get this. And but I just need to remove that line and change it back, change it to how it should be, because we're playing with a data source and with generic constraints, and this is where the problems occur. And this is why I made the video saying when not to use generics. And this line 47 shows you, hey, you're mixing two stuff together here. And here we go, we're starting to get there now. And but get items, that doesn't return. That returns an any item protocol, you see here. But get datasource.get items, that does return get items. See? And now boom, we've got it. So we're very, very close now to this. We're about so many seconds away from getting the answer. And the David from the past making some excuses for it, and I will let him talk. But remember, he was under pressure for a little bit, and now he's possibly going to decide how he can link these two videos together and so on. So let him talk. Okay, so after a lot of messing around, I managed to work out how the compiler was happy with it. So as you can see here, I've got datasource.get items, and if I change it to get items to call the internal method here, you can see that we're returning an item protocol. But Swift compiler at the moment, it wants to make that it wants us to have it as an any right instead. So but when we use the data source in itself, we're already returning the concrete type here, because we've told it already up here what the concrete type is. So we are saying, hey, this is now an array of concrete types items, because we've already defined that. And if we remove then the type annotation, we can see that we get the array of items. So we've got the right data type here within inside of our update function, which means that we can remove the type annotation from this item because we've got the item, which means we can mutate it, and then we can just return this. I was just using this L to see the type inference here. And now we can return the updates. So as you can see here, we now, apart from here, we are now doing well. And type any cannot conform to identifiable. So we need to tell it, hey, you are an item data source here instead. Only concrete types of structs that not conform to protocol. So we know that already. This was never used. Okay, so let's have a quick look over our item service. So we get item, we're getting the items from here, and then we're returning the items here, which is fine. but realistically speaking, we could just return here data source gets item with ID, and this would work fine too. So we can just check this, call throw, that's no problem. And now means we can remove all of this business logic here, and we're just getting it straight from the data source. Add items, so we've got, we don't need that one here. We've created our item because we know about the item within inside of our item service already, so which means we can create our item and then we can return it. We can return the result of the data source item here. So update. Well, we needed an item, so we had to find the item first of all. Could we have found the item like this? I'm guessing we could have done, and we just said data source gets item by ID, ID here, and then we could have thrown this as well. That now gives us the item. We could have changed this around, whoops, change this to there, and we could get rid of this as well. We can run this and we can see it's still working as well. Items is not needed, and if we come and pop that in there instead, we can see that we can manipulate this item, set the title with the new title, and then return it here. So the remove, well, we already can get the item, so we can say the we already have the item ID. So you see, we don't need to do any logic there because we can just do it straight off, and it will then it will move back up again. So we've now managed to reduce our service down as much as possible, and the only thing that the services is doing now is creating this items. This is the source, the owner of items is now item service, and the data source has no idea about item, all right, as in the struct item, because we're only telling it through generics and through these constraints here. We are telling this data source what its item is here. So we now know that when we come to our main, we have our data source here, and within inside of the data source, it doesn't know about item. Item service doesn't need any generics here whatsoever because it knows about it. The view model, form view model, just knows about the item service protocol. It doesn't have any generics in there whatsoever, which is good, and it doesn't know about the items. However, it knows about the item DTO, which fine. We could extract that out a little bit further, but I'm all right with that. All right. So with that said, this is how you basically extract the data, and now you can see here you've got a generic data source. There's a whole bunch more stuff you could do to this, but I hope what it helps you to understand is that we've got multiple views here, right? And yes, we're using a terminal app. Yes, we're using the console app, but that doesn't matter. The whole point is this exactly the same structure. Swift UI has got these structs, these views with a body property. Granted, it says some view, but you're returning some view, and this is a string instead. And they all only speak to their view models. And if there was like a button click, which is what we had in the form view already, submit and button clicked, this went to the view model. And if you watch my previous video, this in the view model, it went to an interactor. Well, service, interactor, they're kind of the same things. This service could have spoke to an interactor, or it could have spoke to a repository or a store or whatever. But the service is the thing that did the work for it, right? But the form view model doesn't know about any concrete implementations here. It only knows about the item service protocol. And even when instantiating the form view model, it only knows about this protocol as well. So there's no generic information here. When we come and look at it, we can only see a struct here as well. All right. And you could obviously then extract this to a protocol too. And we could say then form view protocol as well. And the only thing that this really needs to know about is this here, right? and you could come down to the form view, and we could put a protocol on here instead, and we come to form view protocol, and we do this, and you can see now that this form view now only knows about a protocol, and that's it. All right, and you could extract this to here, and we could call this view model here instead, and put that there. This would also work, you see, so it doesn't matter how you do it, this still is running whether you use generics or not. So, but you don't, it doesn't know about any types here. This is the most important thing. It knows about a protocol here, whether you use generics like this or not, but it doesn't know about the individual type information, be it the item protocol. And that's what I'm trying to say in this video, is that you should be able to pass messages, and or you should be able to have data sources. The information in the views should flow from a data source or a stream all the way down to the view, and should be able to go back up again, but without the views knowing about the data source at all, and not knowing about the type that the data source holds. That's it. With that said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've learned something from this video. I hope you've got something out of it, and I hope in up and coming videos I can widen your knowledge about how to write code. And you know, it's all well and good you learning how to learn the Swift programming language, but you need to understand the design patterns, the architecture, and how views communicate with each other in a way that's where your project can scale. You know, because you start off with one feature, one view, and then you add a second and a third, and then it creates like 50, and before you know it, you've got Meta or Facebook or whatever, and you've got 10,000 different views, and they all need to talk to each other. And you know, you make one change and then you have to change everything. If you use associated types in the wrong place and then you make a change, you then have to change your whole application. So the idea behind this is to understand where the source of truth is for the data, and who actually needs to know about that one data type. And when I say data type, I mean who actually needs to know about this one protocol itself, and who needs to know about this struct, and who creates the structs, who creates the DTOs, where are they created. And views definitely don't need to know this information. All right, that's what view models are there for. Like I said, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and do all of the other social media things that are out there. And if you do have any questions, feedback, concerns, or anything like that, let's start a conversation in the comment section down below. As always, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for supporting my channel. Thank you. And I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao, and goodbye.